So we're in chapter 11, processing and going unconscious. I'll just quickly flick through the slides. So obviously, we're going to record it so it's shared publicly, support others. I'm not going to go through all this, I'm just going to leave the screens. So this is just what we've got on this left this week. And our next monthly book club, Vortex. And we've got Qigong starting on Saturday. WhatsApp groups. Hear My Voice Book Club runs non-profit events so everyone can take part regardless of their financial status. So I ask if any donations this evening, if anybody feels they want to donate or support Michael in these teachings, they can do so on the link there. We're just going to do some shoulder rolls just to loosen up and get ourselves ready for the session. Nice deep breath in, draw up the shoulders. And exhale. Nice deep breath in. And exhale. One more time, nice deep breath in. And exhale. Oh, the slides disappeared. 1 second, let me see, get back on. So Michael Rice is the founder and director of Heartlands Self-Healing Center. Michael, lecturer and teacher on health and healing and true meaning of true forgiveness. So would you like to say hello, Michael? Michael's not got his camera today, so won't be able to see him on screen.
You won't see my sweet face, but I'll say hello, Michael. That's what you want me to say? Yeah, okay. Cool. It's a delight to be here. I'm excited to be on chapter 11. We've been doing this book now for well over, what, a year and a half now that we've been working on it. We did 3 chapters at a time. The links are all available if you want to go back to those. And we've done several worksheets with people over the month. So if you want to, the main tool that we teach is the tool of forgiveness. So I'll be referring to that several times throughout this presentation. And when I say the word forgive, for anyone who might be new, I'm not referring to the idea of our culture that I'm going to let somebody else outside of me off the hook for the pain that's inside of me. So if you're thinking I forgave them or I forgave myself, when you really understand first century Aramaic forgiveness, you will never forgive anybody ever again for anything. And many people in response to that, when I say, oh, that's right, I have to forgive myself. No, you'll actually never forgive yourself for everything ever again. You'll never try to do that because it's not possible to forgive yourself for someone else. We've been taught a fraud in this culture through the Greek translations of the ancient Aramaic teachings on forgiveness, that forgiveness is about how I let you off the hook for what's happening inside of me. And of course, let's say I had a lineup and I had every person, I had 7.5 billion people lined up. And as I shake each of their hands and they walk past me, I say, I forgive you, I forgive you, I forgive you, I forgive you. I've done nothing to deal with what's in my own unconscious mind. And so what the Greeks call forgiveness is actually pardoning. You know, I have this unconscious energy in me that draws somebody to do a particular behavior in my presence, and pain or trauma, hate, fear, rage, guilt, grief, fear, whatever comes up in me. And if I say, I forgive you for that, have I done anything to change what my mind is serving up inside of me? Have I done anything to change the trauma, the drama that resides inside of me? Absolutely nothing. So if you choose to pardon somebody, we're going to say, great, go ahead and pardon them. But if you call that forgiveness, you'll think you're finished. And if you do that, then it's guaranteed that you'll live the title of the book that we're working with, Why Is This Happening to Me Again? Because whatever your part is in whatever's happening in your life is still there inside of you as an energy and will still draw the same result. And you'll do it over and over again until you learn to actually forgive. And the word forgive in Aramaic describes a process by which you enter into your own unconscious mind. The topic of our chapter tonight is processing and going unconscious, going into the unconscious and removing the energetic pattern that is your contribution to what happens in your life. You know, life doesn't happen independent of us, happens in concert with us. And if I have an energetic pattern in me that I hold, and usually it's unconscious, and we're going to talk about opening the unconscious and accessing what's there. If I remove what's there, then the why is this happening to me again experience that I've created again. You know, one of my, you've heard me say it, many of you, one of my favorite tongue-in-cheek lines is, if I'm in pain, if I've gone through this particular painful reality 87 different times with 42 different people, I'm the only one that was there every time. My pain is about me. My forgiveness is about going inside myself. It's a specific step-by-step process for going inside myself, addressing the energy in my own mind that's causing my pain. And then as I forgive my pain, as I remove my pain, and that's what the word forgive really means, then I'm freed of the part of me that keeps drawing this experience to me again and again and again. And once I do that, the game changes. It changes the energetic patterns inside my own physiology. And if there's an energetic pattern based in pain somewhere in my physiology, well, my mind is diseased, is in upset or pain, so is my physiology. When I remove the upset or pain from my mind, because my mind and my body are inextricably connected, I remove that which is causing the disease in my body. So as you start utilizing the first century Aramaic forgiveness process, which is what we're going to be talking about today, then you get to remove that from yourself and you're then finished with it. So that's in a nutshell where we're going. And of course, we've spent the last year and a half unfolding that. It's not a 2-minute conversation. It's a conversation that takes place over time as you shift the mind out of the old patterns of belief. Oftentimes the world talks about being atheist or Jewish or Christian or whatever it happens to be, but as long as you're talking about somebody made you mad, made you sad, frightened you, hurt you, shy of being punched in the nose, nobody can hurt you. But if there's hurt in there, you'll find there'll be a whole procession of people that will come along and literally energetically driven by the unconscious communication, energetic pattern that is sent out from you to others, then people will stop responding to that because it's no longer there to be responded to. And you find that, they talk about miracles happening, and the word miracle, the simple fact is there's only one miracle, and that is that any of this is happening at all. But what people call a miracle is, well, I've gone my whole life and people have always done this to me. And when you remove the part of you, the part in your unconscious that contributes to the whatever the this is, once the this is gone, things change. It's say that's miraculous. Well, when you understand the physics and the physiology of it, it's not really miraculous at all. It's just really awesome. So that's where we're going to head. And anywhere through the presentation, the question comes up. If you want to go to the, I guess it's the reactions tab on your phone or on your computer and hit raise a hand and ask your question. Stop me anywhere along the way and let's go for it. See what we can uncover today.
Yeah. And if you're not able to speak, you can put it in the chat and I will ask Michael a question for you.
Yay. And I want to start out with Yinka, with inviting everybody in the class. One of the tools we teach in our intensives is called the love exchange. And a love exchange is an exercise that you do where you close your own eyes, tap into the deepest, clearest love that you can inside of you. And then open your eyes and consciously, purposely send it to yourself in the mirror or to someone else, person you're working with. We're in an intensive. We do this with partners. And what I'm going to invite everybody to do at this moment is to, there's this face on the screen that's, loud and clear, has this little white thing hanging out of her ear. And I'm going to invite everybody to do a love exchange with Yinka in appreciation for all the work she does to bring this to this whole audience. So I'm doing that love exchange with you right now, Yinka, and inviting everybody else to participate. One of the things we know is that on the level where we are creators and the level where love exists, all matter is transparent to that energy. So it doesn't matter where you are in the world. If you send it to Yinka, Yinka will get it. And so we're doing that right now, Yinka. Thank you for all you do to make this happen. Good to see all the names of everybody that's there. Alina, Ann, Babeth, Christine, Corey. Hey, Georgia. Not sure what the initial is for Ada. Jane. Joe Bryson, welcome, sir. Karen, Mary, Monica, Owen, Raxia, and Tali. Good to, well, I'm not seeing you all right now, but good to have you here. I'm delighted to be here with you. Go for it, Yinka. We're ready to rock.
Ew. So to remember throughout this session, holding your breath is exactly how you acquire a past about something and carry it with you. Holding your breath attaches the pain of an experience to a reality in your mind. So if any triggers come up, remember to just breathe. Notice what the breath is doing. And in our previous chapter, Richard, successful man in his late 30s, following the breakup of another marriage, had contacted Michael. Richard felt his life was a mess and was desperate and wanted Michael's help. Chapter 10, we looked at the ancient wisdom and how the way forgiveness is commonly taught is only a shadow of its true meaning and function. How true forgiveness was originally presented is not even close to the original Aramaic concept. We took a look beneath the misinterpretation and grasped the Aramaic thought structure in the scripture. Discovered the original intention of religion was to create community where it was safe and nurturing to live, and understood the true meaning of forgiveness. So it is quite normal as people to begin to understand this work, for them to flip-flop between clarity and their old beliefs. Can anyone relate? What areas do you flip-flop back into blame? Can you just notice? Maybe you might want to jot it down or even put it in the chat. What areas do you flip back into blame?
One of the things that I notice as I've worked with people over the last 50 years, and I've worked with thousands of different people, is that even people who say they're not religious are actually deeply religious, in that they, by about the age of 4, brought up in our Western culture, that being brought up in this culture means that by about that age of 4, you are a card-carrying member of the one world universal religion of blame. And it's cultural. It's taught to us from the beginning. We have modeled by the people in our lives that they're not responsible for what's happening in their lives. It's all somebody else's fault. They made me sad. They made me afraid. They hurt me. And if you have live in a world where that's the thinking you've been trained into, then your mind has to show you that what's going on inside of you is caused by something outside of you. And that's called denial and living in projection. What we're looking to do with this tool of forgiveness, and the real meaning of forgiveness, is to collapse the projection of our unconscious pain, the pictures produced by our minds that show us that everybody else is the cause of our pain, to collapse that perception. And when you collapse it, it collapses in, if you think of a structure Not a very nice example, but it's a really powerful example. Virtually everybody in the world is familiar with the Twin Towers on 9/11 going down, just collapsing free fall speed right into their own footprint. Well, that's kind of what happens with the constructs of the mind that we call perception. Most people think that when they think that they can look out through their eyes into the world. And I'm going to offer to you that that's one of the biggest frauds that's ever been perpetrated upon humanity. Your eye is an antenna structure. It is a device that receives light frequencies. Those light frequencies carry energy. Energy resonates what's inside of you. And if you're in denial, if you think somebody else is the problem, is the reason why you're feeling and experiencing the pain that you're experiencing, then your mind will generate literally a construct of that other person or situation, or maybe even yourself. It'll deliver to you a construct where your pain, you can see that it's really true. They caused it because you can see that your mind generates a picture of that. But that picture, rather than actually seeing out through your eyeballs, you can't see out through an antenna. You can't see out through your eyes. Your brain generates pictures based on the information that comes into you and what that information resonates in you. If your picture is based in pain, it's because there's pain inside of you. So imagine that your perception, that construct of your mind, is like the 9/11 tower. And when you actuate forgiveness, what happens is that structure collapses in on its own footprint. When that picture collapses in on its own footprint, just like the 9/11 towers went into its own footprint, you have access to what's inside of you that is otherwise hidden. That is, you have access to your unconscious mind. If it's too deep, too painful, too powerful for you to really look at directly, then you'll project that. You'll want to keep holding on to it, something outside of you. And there's a period where one goes unconscious. And one of the reasons for our study group, one of the reasons for hanging out in community together, is to be here as the space for anyone who goes unconscious to be able to process through those internal hidden energies and free yourself of those influences. When you're freed of those influences, your mind's constructs change dramatically. And perhaps if there's anybody, we've done worksheets with several people over the last year and a half. If there's anybody as we're going through this that you're inclined to, and you want to share a worksheet that you've done, just very briefly, that I had a situation where 10 words or less, and once I completed the forgiveness process, my whole experience of that situation changed. I'll share one with you that always stands out in my mind, and this actually, in terms of my own personal process, goes back about 30 years ago. And this was one of the most dramatic shifts in my world, in my perceptual constructs that I've had in my whole life. And it was a situation where I had it all laid out in my mind. I'm hurting, but I'm really clear how, and my mind showing me exactly what they did and how it's all their fault. Rather than buying that construct in my mind that made what was going on inside of me somebody else's fault, I was able in that particular moment, and it was just, it was like one of those peak experiences for me. I applied the forgiveness tool, that construct collapsed. And literally 30 seconds later, I couldn't even imagine how I ever made it up that it was their fault. It was so clear to me that I was dealing with something inside myself. That's the experience that we're hoping to provide you the tools to have for yourself. Because when you think you're looking at something outside of you, you're actually looking at a picture that's painted on the inside of your eyeballs. And we think we're looking out, but we're not. We're looking at constructs of our own minds. When you know how those constructs are formulated, when you know what they're made of, and you know how to collapse them so you can change what's inside of you that makes up your own perceptual constructs, everything changes, including your physiology, because those painful experiences are literally, people try to separate. We live in a culture that separates, well, we've got the mind over here and we've got the body over here. Well, imagine I've got a silver dollar And if you were in the United States, on one side of the silver dollar would be the head of George Washington, and on the other side would be a picture of a bird. Can I take the head off of that silver coin so that there's just a tail left? At what point, if I shave the head off, have I got just the tail on the coin, the bird? I can't do it. There's always going to be a flip side. There's no separation between the mind and the body. What happens in the mind happens in the body. What happens in the body happens in the mind. What we're looking to do is to support you finding the empowerment inside of you with which, no matter what's happening in your life, you can collapse into the root of that pain, which means you're going to get to experience it directly. But if you'll enter the practice of keeping love present in your mind, then those things that you access will begin to dissolve. You will literally undo every painful experience of your life, every trauma of your life, and you'll literally end up, as time unfolds and use the tool, processing through and letting go of not only the pain, the trauma of your own life, but the generational issues that were passed on to you genetically that have never been resolved. So in a nutshell, that's where we're heading. I hope that makes sense for everybody. Go for it, Inka.
So this is to be expected as one learns a new conceptual language and a new way of thinking. Richard was no exception to this rule. And neither are you.
Neither are we. None of us. None of us.
None of us are you.
We're all in the same boat together. One of the games of the ego mind is, oh, my pain's different than everybody else's. Mine's worse than yours. And, people become addicted to their victimhood, and hand in hand with that, of course, goes the blame. We're going to invite you to put an end to any addiction you have to being a victim or pain or blaming anyone else, taking responsibility for the energetic patterns in your own physiology, uncovering them and removing them. The only tool I found in 50 years plus of doing this work to consistently, persistently reach into your own mind and literally remove the capacity you have to ever even produce pain. And that tool is called forgiveness. So that's what we're heading for.
So Richard, I don't quite get it yet, but I am beginning to realize how easy it is to lapse into my old beliefs, and it doesn't feel very good. Richard said, frustrated with himself. I'm not quite sure what you mean, Michael replied. Well, an hour ago, I grasped the idea that healing and responsibility are an inside job. It was very clear to me, Richard answered. Now I've reverted to my old hostility, cynicism, and blame. I'm sorry I jumped all over you about Aramaic, Michael.
So Richard, like everyone, and Richard's the character in our book, does not have much of an experience of himself as love. Literally, the perceptual constructs that he has in his mind of himself are made up of power person messages based in pain and trauma. And few people in our world recognize that we're designed to function as love, to know ourselves as love, to realize that literally, if you go back and hold a newborn child and tap into the essence of the newborn, you find there is the presence of love. Your newborn essence is the same as mine, is the same as Yinka's, is the same as literally every person on the planet, including the most, what can I say, depending on which cultural words you use, the most disgusting people, the most intimidating people, the most traumatic-based people. Every one of us started out the same. And when that's lost, we function out of the energetic patterns in our own minds. Each of us, each of you are designed to be healthy, whole, and to function as love. And to the degree that that's not the experience you're having, your body, your mind, and your life are going to reflect those dis-ease states. When you get to the truth of who you are, and sometimes it can be tenuous, it can be hard to hold on to the truth of who you are, because the mind has so many generational voices of unresolved pain that gets stolen away from you. So in the book, at this point, my conversation with Richard, a little earlier in the book, he was starting to go, oh, okay, I'm starting to see this. I get it. Yeah. So my pain's internally generated, and I can, he's like excited about that. And then 5 minutes later, as Yinka just read, he's like, wait a minute, where did that go? I've lost it. Well, no, it's just been buried by those unconscious dynamics. And what we're looking to do is to open that unconscious mind. If you go into the ancient Aramaic language, you find that the word that represents the unconscious is the heart. They're not talking about the physical organ. They're literally talking about the unconscious mind. Or the desert. It's a code word for the unconscious. And so when we hear things like, you must forgive from your heart the wrongs of your brother, that's not a bleeding heart statement that you're supposed to be mushy and forgive them. It means that you've got to go into your own unconscious mind and remove what you've projected into your mind's construct about your brother. And when you collapse that and remove that, then you're the one who's freed of it. That's what forgiveness is really about. And that will be replaced by the truth of who you are as love. Literally, and I'm not talking about the culture's, mushy, I love you kind of stuff. All that stuff is a fraud based in approval. I'm talking about the actual literal fact that your essential nature is active present love. And you'll start as you use these tools to get glimpses of that. And the more deeply you apply the tools, the more deep your experience will become of continuously functioning as love and out of love. And that's where we want to head.
So Richard saying, I'm sorry. May I offer a different thought, Richard? He nodded in agreement. People who say I'm sorry a lot usually end up being sorry people. In this work, we have an alternative to that. If you wish to apologize, go ahead, but drop the idea of being sorry. Replace it with a statement of what you intend to do if that situation arises in the future.
So when people say I'm sorry, everything that people say I'm sorry for is a thought they have about something they or someone else has done. And if that thought is based in pain, then they'll be in a painful experience. If you're uncomfortable in trauma, under attack, or experiencing pain, using this tool is going to change your life. It will show you not how to treat your pain, but how to address and change your disturbances, your pain, and all suffering on the level of cause. And of course, when you start to do that process, you're going to touch into a lot of stuff that you've probably been hiding from yourself all your life. There's a time period where that can seem like a hopeless task, the impossible dream. My offering is the consistent, persistent application of the tool of forgiveness is what will remove from your heart, your unconscious, those trauma energies. That's how you get out of the desert of unconsciousness.
I'm feeling a little lost. It's like I'm back where I started. I'm ready to jump whole hog into a blame again, and I don't understand how I lost the level of insight I had. I don't have any idea what you mean when you suggest I replace saying I'm sorry.
So once again, I'm sorry for this. When I focus on whatever this is, I intensify what it is. If it's something that's painful to me, and usually that would be why someone's saying they're sorry, then just by focusing on it, they're intensifying their pain. That's the place to apply forgiveness. Instead of unconsciously intensifying your pain, you apply the forgiveness tool, and there's a worksheet, step-by-step process, which we won't get into today, but there are several links on Yinka's website and on our YouTube channel where we've walked somebody through the whole process of how this tool of forgiveness works. And so you can access those for full instructions. You can go to your app store on your phone, and if you type in the words Heartland, Heartland, Aramaic forgiveness, Aramaic forgiveness, you'll see the world's only forgiveness app. On that app, you'll find 2 different versions of the worksheet. You'll also find a children's game for introducing children to forgiveness. And as you apply that forgiveness process, you'll literally be moving through. We define in this work processing as the ability to keep love conscious, active, and present when something less than love comes up. If you do that by the simple exposure to active present love, those painful energetic patterns that perhaps have been going on in your bloodline for years will literally disappear.
So it's natural at this stage, with 2 belief systems fighting for your attention, to waver in your clarity. You are going to just you are doing just fine in that account, on that account. Sorry, let me move this closer. The alternative to "I'm sorry" would sound something like, "I apologize for taking out my hostility on you, Michael. In the future, if anger and resistance comes up in me, I will breathe and work towards taking responsibility for my upset."
And what you'll find is as you use the tool, you'll become more adept at being able to access those unconscious dynamics that if you're the first one in your bloodline, I think back to my own family system, and I can't think of anybody, mother, father, aunts, uncles, cousins, sisters, brothers, neighbors, friends. I can't think of anybody that could have said when they're in pain, "Oh, I'm going to stop for a minute and I'm going to do some forgiveness work and process through what's going on inside of me that's causing my pain." I don't know anybody. And most people who come to this work pretty much can say the same thing. And so when you start to use the tool, you're an early adopter, and that means there's probably a lot to go through, a lot to be dealt with. I got a text just a few days ago from a gentleman who had done our work over a period of 2 or 3 years, about 20 years ago. And back about a year ago, he came back to me. We hadn't heard from him in, I don't know, 20 years. He's a medical professional. And he contacted us. He's like, I'm remembering the work I did with you years ago, how beneficial it was, but I didn't stick with it. And I'm ready to go for it again. I'm ready to work through it. And he actually did our course, our online self-study course on codependence and communication. So he did that over a period of about 6 or 7 months. It's a self-study course, actually 90 hours or so of video. And in that, when people do that course, we have what we call a personal code evaluation that reflects to people where the holes are in their minds and what their work is, specifically where their own blockages are. And this gentleman did the course, did his post-course evaluation, and saw changes that, if you talk to somebody in the world of psychology that does psychological testing, they'd say those scores don't change. That's not possible. And yet on a scale of 1 to 100, this gentleman had changes of 50 and 60 and 70 points in some areas of his life. On October 23rd, I'm just looking right now at his text to me. On October 23rd, he wrote me a text asking for support. Once he finished the course, he continued, like he's been doing worksheets every day. So here's what his text said to me on October 23rd. "Hi, Michael. I've never experienced such extreme healing crisis. I can now see how people can die. I've been through a bunch. This was a heart and lung crushing experience, and such deep, deep sorrow and sadness under extreme anger and hate. This went back so far into my father's life, who was born in Germany post-World War II, whose mom was an ex-Nazi nurse and a prostitute. And my dad, who was 2 years old. So this is the memory, starting to describe the memory that he had come up in his mind. And he could touch into, and he had the experience. He says, my dad at 2 years old wandered around and drank out of mud puddles in the streets. He was by himself, and he started to drink at the age of 4 when he was old enough to crawl up on a bar stool. He was put in an orphanage and was sexually abused. It went back so far. This was a whopper. I'm still in it, but on the other end. I had such an issue with him because of his abuse and watching my older brother when I was a kid having a schizophrenic break in front of me due to the abuse, and he never recovered. I don't want to dwell on the story, but I feel my dad's power person and have total empathy and compassion for him now more than I've ever had or thought I could. I felt I was initiated into something very big. And he had written this text, and the final line of his text is, would you and Jeannie please hold me in your thoughts and prayer and love? So that's what happened. And then on November 4th, if you want to check our radio show archives, we do a radio show 5 days a week, 2 hours a day. And on Sunday, November 4th, or pardon me, it was actually November 3rd, just last week, that he called into the show, and we walked him through a worksheet on the show. So you can listen to his worksheet if you go to our archives and look up November 3rd's radio show. And the next day, he wrote me the text and said, thank you for the expert guidance yesterday. I dumped a lot of tension and stress. Feels like an electrical current is throwing through me. I really appreciate your and Jeannie's support and help, plus the support of all the listeners on the show. So that's what forgiveness does. And we're here to offer you that technology.
Richard takes a breath and released a long exhale. So I thought we could do that also. Take a breath, a deep breath, and with a released long exhale.
Breathing with you.
I commit myself to being responsible for my feelings and breathing instead of attacking. This is so simple. Why didn't I think of it? Says Richard.
And, you know, he's saying something very profound there. This process is so simple. I mean, when you go to the worksheet and you look at it and you go, how could this ever change anything in my mind? It's so simple that people think, oh, this couldn't possibly do anything. If you use the tool, watch what happens. Let's see, I think, Yinka, it was our last show that we did a live worksheet. And if you watch that video, the young lady who did the worksheet, and thank you for your willingness to expose yourself and to be right there. You can just watch the mega change in her physiology. That one is, the ones on my radio show aren't visual, they're just auditory. But that worksheet we did last time was just monumental. And watch it. Look at the steps where there were several really good questions in that session, and then take the tool, follow the modeling, and watch what happens.
You could really see the change in her.
It was monumental, wasn't it? It was just so awesome to watch her.
She's not here today, but
No.
I'll check in to see how she's getting on since then. So are you willing?
You know, before you go on, Yinka, just a thought. You know, the fact that you mentioned she's not here after that monumental change, I would think that every session for the rest of eternity that she could do, she'd be joining us with. And I don't know what's going on for her, but it wouldn't surprise me. Oftentimes when people have that big a shift, they reach a whole new level of vitality. And that means that new layers of opportunities to heal come up. And oftentimes what happens, as the topic of this particular session is, we go unconscious. It's like too much to handle. And that's where you just keep putting one foot in front of the other and using the tools and processing through those things. And you'll have occasions, as Richard just described, where, gee, a few minutes ago I was understanding this perfectly. I got it. And then all of a sudden it's mud. It doesn't mean anything. It's like silly. It's like, who would ever do this? And that's what happens as you process out those unconscious dynamics, and you get flooded. Might be something about that symbology of that flood that quote unquote destroyed the world, is that you get flooded with these unconscious energetic patterns. And if you get sucked into them again, sucked into your membership in the one world universal religion of blame, you can go back into, look what they're doing to me. And then you apply the tool and you get a little more conscious and a little more conscious until you can literally open the veil. In the ancient teachings, it said the veil of the temple must be rent in twain. That was not a purple curtain in the church, as as churchianity teaches. They're talking about you have to break down the barrier between your own subconscious and unconscious mind. And when you do, you expose those unconscious dynamics, and that's when you get to work through them. You don't get to work through them without using the tools. And so there is a tendency to often go unconscious. That's not unusual. Just be aware that that's a possibility. And if that happens, then be with it, keep using the tools, and watch what happens. You'll tend to come out the other side. You'll free yourself of those unconscious dynamics. But it does take time. Carl Jung is probably one of the greatest analysts of all time. And he talks about how each of us has thought disorders. They're carried by all of us. And Carl Jung calls that the shadow. You hear people doing shadow work. Well, one person who was a Jungian analyst contacted me after being exposed to these tools. And he was like, oh my God, this is shadow work on steroids. Yes, that's what happens. And in antiquity, experiencing life through a mind filled with thought disorders was described by many metaphors. It's called as seeing through a glass darkly or lost in the desert. In a mind where love is restricted or voided altogether, that is, unresolved fear or hostility, and aberrant perception governs the mind, in that radically infected mind, we call that person medically ill, mentally ill. Medically, that's what they're called. A less injured mind, and people label themselves as, oh, I'm angry, depressed, agitated, rageful, or violent. In a trauma-informed mind, the shadow colors, defines, and gives meaning to everything you perceive, including yourself. And so we're seeing ourselves and life, as was stated, through a glass darkly. With sufficient energetic trauma, the experience of self as it truly is, as love, as worthy, as capable, as acceptable, as honorable, as deserving of approval, being cared for, that's obliterated. And when the mind constructs a worldview and experiences itself through the dynamics rooted in those thought disorders, it's self-inflicting pain. Unknowingly, the mind is engaging in a creative act. It's using its own thought disorders to perpetrate its self-inflicted pain. Jung really brilliantly outlined the impact and the solution of succumbing to ourselves as seeing ourselves and the world through such a mind. Here's what Jung said, quote, "Greater than all physical dangers are the tremendous effects of delusional ideas, which are yet denied all reality by our world-blinded consciousness. Until the unconscious becomes conscious, it will direct our lives and we will call it fate," says Jung. So if the energy that's moving within us is based in any form of pain, hostility, or fear, it must be owned to be removed. If it's not owned, i.e., they made me, it's their fault I'm experiencing this. If it's not owned, its underlying cause will remain hidden and inaccessible. And literally the noise of that inaccessible pain firing off in the unconscious will cover the subtle energy of your ability to choose and to experience yourself as who you are. When you apply the removal tool, the forgiveness tool, and it might be insincere and seemingly futile at first, literally it will over time weaken the noise in your mind. Sufficient weakening and the truth of who you are will appear full blown in your mind, and it's a powerful, awesome experience. Enemies do not exist in the actual world. They're a fabrication, a perceptual construct of the projected shadow side of one's own mind. This is why the felt experience of an enemy is so painful. And the whole experience is internally generated. We hear, for instance, here's one expression of that. We hear the parent who attempts to explain away their perverted actions, the actions they take based in unresolved thought disorders toward a son or daughter. And we hear, and maybe you've heard this. I heard it when I was a kid. I'm only beating you or berating you or degrading you because I love you. And this hurts me more than it does you. Duh. No, mom, no, dad. You're abusing me because you and I exist in a desert of unresolved generational family trauma. And I offer it does not hurt you in the least to do this to me. It alleviates and gives vent to the unconscious pain you're living in every day. And when we choose to change that dynamic, then the whole game changes. And again, if anything we're saying arouses questions for you, put it in the chat room or raise your hand and let's talk about it. See if we can help clarify it for you.
So are you willing to commit throughout the rest of this session to be responsible for your feelings and breathing instead of attacking or blaming?
So you'll notice that most people, when they have a trauma-based experience, one, they have no idea it's coming from within them. It's all somebody outside of them. But you'll notice that they walk away from that experience totally focused on and thinking about the person who did it to them, instead of querying their own minds. So when we have energetic traumatic experiences, it's because there's something within us. Many, if not all of our wounds and conflicts, and therefore our pain and inclinations toward violent emotions, violent thoughts, violent behaviors, are rooted in genetically inherited trauma, what Jung called the shadow. Multi-generational assaults reinforced through unconscious action, generation after generation, stored and projected and repeated, family, friends, and enemies all ad nauseum. Each of these painful events appears in the mind as a separate and seemingly disconnected experience. And the only thing they're connected with is it's happening to me again. So again, Carl Jung, describing the source of our unconsciously driven behavior and seemingly unavoidable repeating generational trauma and conflict, explains, here's what he says, here's how he describes it. Whatever is rejected from the self appears, and I'm going to put in his quoted comment, it appears through blame in the world called perception as an event. We meet ourselves, that is, we meet ourselves in our projections of others, time and again in 1,000 disguises on the path of life. Until the unconscious becomes conscious, it will direct our lives, and we will call it fate. Everything, this is again Jung's word, everything that irritates us about others can lead to understanding oneself. So it's a trick of perpetuated by biased, corrupted perceptual constructs in the mind that allows us to think these events are separate from each other. The connecting link, when the mind allows us a glimpse, is that they're all based on unresolved traumas that, when activated, obscure the subtle, permanently available human experience of ourselves as our true nature love. When we're disconnected from our true essence, when vision is blocked by that pain, these unresolved but resolvable dynamics express as attack and defense as long as they remain unconscious in the psyche of the individuals or community. So once you realize that and you learn to collapse those constructs of your mind that were learned, that were literally energetically inherited. There are several universities have been doing research, and they're showing one particular project that was done was with children whose parents were in the Holocaust. And they took other children, Jewish children, who whose parents were not in the Holocaust, and they literally found that their enzymatic and energetic profiles, their physiology were different because these traumas are inherited. And it's time for us to undo those. And there's a 13th century Sufi mystic named Rumi, and he says it this way: love is the cure for your pain. Your pain will keep giving birth to more pain until your eyes constantly exhale love as effortlessly as your body yields its scent. So these tools are designed to put an end to the multi-generational fantasy of victimhood that our corrupted perception seems to prove is true. We must rethink the lie that somehow being a victim earns us a right to exact vengeance, as we block awareness of the damage of even thinking about what that vengeance inflicts on us personally. The person engaged in vengeance is inflicting more trauma on themselves. And active present love is the master solvent of trauma. And the invitation here is that someone, ultimately, hopefully everyone in the community, gets big enough to bring healing to their internal trauma. And then we're empowered to be the space for others to work through their internalized trauma. And this does not come about by forgiving the perpetrators of the event that triggers our own hidden PTSD into activity. So underlying patterns, often generational, are usually ignored and left hidden to be activated another day. Please let go of any forgiveness advice that says you have to let somebody else off the hook because there's pain in your mind, and walk away from the situation talking to yourself about yourself and your own internal process. As you start to investigate, as you develop the skill of being able to reach into your own unconscious mind, you'll remove those traumatic experiences. And when you remove them from your genes, from your mind, from your emotions, and from your body, everything changes. Please remember that if someone tells you you need to forgive somebody else or yourself, understand they know nothing about actual forgiveness. Never forgive anyone, yet learn to forgive continuously. Make sense?
To practice all of these tools are simple. It's just a matter of retraining our minds to think differently. In the Aramaic thought system, this issue was addressed by the statement that we would be transformed by the renewal of our minds.
How do you renew your mind? You got to remove the garbage from it. Who was the last person you can think of in your family bloodline that had any idea that when they are in trauma, they could remove that trauma from themselves internally? Rare is the person who's ever answered that question. I never knew anybody that could do that. Okay, so that's what you're about to learn here. That's what we're here for.
So as you practice using these tools, it will get easier to hold to a new thought structure when old patterns kick in. When you become aware or conscious of your own behavior and the inclination that come from your internal reality structure, you have made a giant leap. It usually takes much longer before someone can see the inconsistencies in their thoughts, words, and behavior. We call a loss of awareness of one's internal process going unconscious. Catching yourself at that is a wonderful skill to develop. In addition to the frustration of feelings like you are slipping back into the old thinking pattern, you may also have 20 questions begging to be answered all at once. This happens as people get involved in this study. It can be difficult to keep the issues and insights straight. Some circling through and around the questions that come up is inevitable. This work, with its synthesis of so many disciplines, is a lot of information to digest in one sitting. It takes patience and time to build the brain cells and integrate those disciplines so that the tools become fully available and functional. There is an intricate pattern of interconnectedness which one must usually step back to see. As you do your work and sit with the insights that come, you will see how all of life is synchronized.
And breathe. Remember that breathing is one of the keys to processing those unconscious energies. And, sadly, when someone holds unresolved pain or trauma within, it's easy to put the underlying energies of that trauma, when they're triggered into activity, into my brain's internally constructed perceptual images of the other. The experience, the pretense that they're the cause of the repeating trauma I'm experiencing, is the true definition of projection. We did an earlier session from the book, Processing and Going Unconscious. When I make my pictures of others out of my internally hidden dissociated pain, I believe my mind's lies and I can pretend others are the reason I'm in pain. Again, that's called being a devout, card-carrying member of the one world universal religion of blame. In this way, my mind's trauma or pain-based interpretation of events appears to be the truth, which directly leads me away from understanding what's really going on. I have to collapse that construct in my mind, and that's where true healing happens.
To keep breathing. When old trash surfaces, it is not fun, but sorting through what comes up in the presence of love is what clears it out.
So many, again, if not all of our wounds and therefore our pain are rooted in genetically inherited traumas held inside of us. Multi-generational assaults reinforced through unconscious actions, generation after generation, stored and repeated, are the reason pain is happening within us. These things are never imposed from the outside, and the blocks to the awareness of ourselves, our true selves as love, are internal and therefore removable if you've got the technology to do it. And here it is. I've spent over half a century scanning the globe, looking for the tools. How does it work? The only consistent, persistent tool that I have found, if people will use it, that takes us back to the direct experience of the return to love, is the first century Aramaic tool of forgiveness. And the work that needs to be done is a strictly inside job. The act of removing that intergenerational trauma is a true definition of forgiveness. And all perceptions, all constructs of the mind are autobiographical. The constructs of our mind tell us first and foremost what's going on inside of us. And until generational traumas are removed, we're easily sucked into, we're easily tricked into believing the false pictures and perceptions generated by our minds. As long as we believe something outside of us is cause, rather than just the trigger of what's moving within us, we inhabit a world of lies. Feelings do not come from seeing something. They come from internally generated energies, all self-imposed. So blamers would do well to understand denial. And denial is the act of thinking or speaking as though something outside of oneself is the cause of what's moving on the inside. Denial results in instant dissociation, the hiding of the truth that blocks awareness of one's own internal dynamics. This results in an unnatural condition for human beings called the unconscious mind. There's a really, you might just make a note of it. There's a really powerful song sung by Alanis Morissette. Jump on YouTube when we're finished and give a listen to that song. The song's entitled Madness. And the basic line in the song is, "Now I realize that the madness in me is brought up in the presence of you." And that madness carries on when you're not in the room. Oh, I wish I could blame you, but then I'd miss this opportunity to heal my own mind. Powerful tune. She really puts it together well. Alanis Morissette, the song title is Madness.
So can you remember feeling this lack of clarity ever before?
And most people respond to that as, yeah, I've been through that one 87 different times with 42 different people. So
That's
once
it,
again,
Mark.
you're not an innocent victim. You know, denial sounds like you made me mad, you made me sad, you made me afraid, you hurt me, I'm an innocent victim, and you attacked me. But you know, all those things happen out there in the world. But the construct my mind gives me, if I'm not, if I have not cleaned out my own unconscious dynamics, the construct my mind gives me is all the things I need to verify that it's true, it's all your fault. And the very things that people don't want to deal with, don't want to look at, are the things that are most urgent to be looked at and dealt with. And rest assured, life has a purpose. Life abhors us being diseased. If we hold disease energies, the purpose of life is to kick us right square in the limitation. So life will give you every opportunity you need again and again and again because you're unconsciously directing the show. Now, you've got to be careful here that you don't move into the other part of this blame game, and that is that, well, now you're blaming me, the victim. No, I'm not blaming you, the victim. I'm looking to empower you to touch into your own unconscious dynamics and remove those traumatic energies. So once again, the purpose of life is to kick us right square in the limitation. And the closer we get to someone, you know, children are like having our unconscious mind hang out in true living color and Dolby sound. Everything they do when we're in upset is motivated by the energies in us that are participating in that upset. Children are made of the same genetic material as we are, only they don't have a stop button. And you know what punishment is? It's an effort to stop them from playing out what's in their minds that they inherited from you. In many cases, that's what happens. So your task, mission impossible, should you choose to do it, it's actually mission possible, is to make your own unconscious conscious.
So why don't you just ask me about my whole life, Richard said with annoyance. All of a sudden, a grin came across his face. I get it. Why should I expect to deal with everything in an instant when it has taken years to get to where I am today, right? As I said, it is a process, replied Michael. Does this mean I have to go digging through and re-experiencing everything in my past? I don't want to do that, Richard informed Michael.
And the idea here is not that I have to, you know, there's the old analyst's idea that you lay on the couch for 20 years and you try to find the deep, dark, dirty, nasty thing that happened to you, and then your life's going to be okay. We're not suggesting you do that. What we're suggesting is you recognize who you are, you claim who you are as love, and you choose to walk through life as love. And when something less than love comes up in you, you recognize that that's an opportunity to forgive, to remove that energy that's less than love. And that's the whole idea of the forgiveness process. Now, the slippery twist that's left millions letting others off the hook for what was generated by their own minds, rather than taking responsibility and removing it, forgiving it from their minds, is that game projection, and then letting others off the hook for what's happening inside of me. Again, if you choose to pardon someone, great, pardon them. Then do the work of forgiveness.
So there's no digging around required. If you get good at re-experiencing your past, that's what you'll be good at, re-experiencing your past.
So letting somebody outside of us off the hook for what's going on inside of us will never rid us of our experience of internally generated hurt, upset, or pain. Outer directed acts do not bring correction to internally generated dynamics. Engaging in actual forgiveness creates a visceral opening that facilitates the flow of light and love into every instant, every experience of our lives and our physiology. Alone or lonely, afraid or sad, rageful or hateful, through forgiveness, the space is created for love to flow into that clean and open space within your mind that happens when you forgive. And then the transmutation or the removal of the energy of pain happens in that instant. And lived pain or turmoil is always an invitation to end denial, to learn, and to apply forgiveness. By the way, you can go to our website, whyagain.org, and on the homepage, you'll see a picture of my book, Why Is This Happening to Me Again? Click on the cover, drill down, and you can download the book free. Unfortunately, we can't sell you a copy. It's out of print right now. Although you can oftentimes, you'll find it on Amazon or eBay, used copies back, the book's actually been out there for more than 30 years now. And way back then, we sold enough books that they're still circulating around the planet in used form. So if you'd like to have a physical book, you can find it usually for $2 or $3 or $5 on either eBay or Amazon.
Barry's she has a question to do with the Heartland worksheet.
Somebody got a question?
Barry, do you have a question about the worksheet?
Yes. I have the question about the new goal. I can find the other steps, but the new goal, I made today a worksheet on that Heartland site about was a girlfriend, and the girlfriend is, I think she is the same as my mother. And I could not find a new goal for the old goal.
So tell me give me just a 2-second synopsis. What happened and what was the goal that you used on the worksheet?
What happened is that the girlfriend had, that was, I had she asked me for help, and I said, yes, I can do it tomorrow. And then next day she said, oh, no, I do not want that. I think it is not important for me. And then she put off the phone, and I was sitting alone and thought, yeah, was in pain somehow, and also in anger. And that was, and when I made today the worksheet, I thought somehow the same as my mother. And
good catch. So what was the goal that you had for her?
I had the goal, I should be very important for her.
Okay.
She should ask me for help, and also she
Abandoned you?
Somehow, yeah.
Okay, so I would suggest then, when you get to step 7 in the worksheet, where you're based in the issue that's going on, and you're doing that worksheet around this girlfriend, and it sounds like the goal would be for her to be there for you, to honor you when you've offered support and assistance. And when you say that you had a memory of mother and it felt like some of the energies around mother, likely it sounds like very possibly that, mom, when you expected her to be there for you, wasn't there.
Yeah.
And so the goal that you would set in that worksheet would probably be something like, so whenever I think of you, Mary, or whatever her name is, I'm going to just breathe, stop what I'm doing, and really be there for you. So that would be a new goal for you based in that issue coming from love, something you can offer to her. Now, when you really truly do that, and even though she's, insulted you, has withdrawn, whatever, has treated you poorly, if you stay in the connected space of, so I'm going to be here for you and I'm going to extend love in your direction, guess what? In her presence, that energy of love passes through your unconscious and you start to heal that part of you that had a similar trauma with mom. The presence of love moving through you to her, that new goal, will heal you. And then I'd suggest that you then take whatever was coming up around mom and start to do worksheets around mom based around this issue that she's shown you. She's given you the gift of showing you some of the unresolved energetic dynamics, the thought disorders, the unconscious dynamics that you developed with mom. So this is your opportunity to heal those mom issues, would be my offering. So that'll probably be many, many worksheets to be done around mom. She's shown you something that it's now time for you to heal. That would be my take on that. That would be my assessment of it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It's
Good.
not only totally, but that it is really, as you said, I can give that to her, then that gave me such a big relief. Not
Yep.
to blame her any longer, but oh, I can do something. I'm not I don't know, I'm not helpless.
You don't have to withdraw because she does. You don't have to withdraw the presence of love from your mind because she withdraws. And I suspect that what happened in your relationship with mom is mom was carrying so much trauma that when certain things would happen, she'd withdraw, she'd disappear. And here's a little girl who's like, wait a minute, where's that love that I'm supposed to have? Where's that nurturing energy from mom? It's gone. So there are your worksheets to do. And remember that you, in the presence of any experience in your life, can bring that love forward. You don't have to wait for somebody else to do it when you remove this trauma-based thought disorder from your own mind.
No.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Taking that breath of relief with you. Yes, that's it. That's the core of forgiveness. That's how it happens. And there might be some other worksheets too around, looking at your goal for her to be there with you when she opens communication and canceling that goal and looking at deeper and deeper layers, processing those deeper layers of your own mind. Good one. Good work, young lady.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Thanks for the question. Good opportunity to add a refinement and taste that relief that comes with knowing that, whatever's going on, I don't need to go to the outside world for approval or love. I can show up in my own mind, whatever anybody's doing, whatever comes up in my mind, I can show up in my own mind as love.
Mm.
Phew, what a relief.
Yeah, really.
I don't know if they had the commercial, but there was a commercial for a certain pain reliever that used to be very popular here in the United States. And the key line in it was, pop, pop, fizz, fizz. Oh, what a relief it is.
Yeah.
And yeah, when I realize I can bring that space in, I don't have to withdraw love from my own mind because of what anybody else is doing.
Mm.
But if I had modeling from my power person, usually a parent, of withdrawing when the stress got too high, then I will tend to do the same. And now you've defeated that one. Big piece of work, important piece.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Go for it, Yinka.
So the practice with these tools is to hold a space of love within yourself and live in today's world from that perspective. If something less than love surfaces at any time, use the tools. As you do this, things from your past that impact your present perception will surface to be healed. You can only deal with and heal your reality structure in the present. So are you breathing?
Thank you, Richard, for finishing off that lesson.
Breathing. Why do you keep bugging me about breathing? What's the big deal? Richard cried angrily.
Well, since our chapter is about processing and going unconscious and dealing with unconscious dynamics, let's look at the mind for a minute. There are 3 levels at which the mind operates. Now, we live in a culture that tells us there's a conscious mind and an unconscious mind, and somebody lost their mind, and somebody found their mind, whatever. There are all kinds of different ideas about mind. I'm going to offer a definition here. And the mind that we're talking about when it comes to what goes on in our physiology is information stored within us can fire or be activated or resonated on 3 different levels. For instance, there's a piece of information in your mind right now that you're totally oblivious to. You don't even know what I'm going to say, so those brain cells aren't firing. But watch when I happen to say, don't think about the color of your car. And what happens? Something about the color of your car comes into view, right? Resonates in your mind. So we've just demonstrated what the conscious and the subconscious mind are. The conscious mind, that is what we're aware of, and this is just a function of brain cells. The conscious mind is what we're aware of at any given moment. If I say, what does the front door of your house look like? That's in your subconscious mind. When I provide the stimulus with my voice, the energy to resonate the front door of your house, those brain cells fire, and that information comes out of the subconscious and becomes conscious. Now, notice you're not thinking about the color of your car. But a minute ago, when I resonated those brain cells, the subconscious brain cells relating to the color of your car resonated and all of a sudden became conscious. So conscious and subconscious are continuously exchanging places. Whenever something is intensified in its firing within us, we become aware of it. We become conscious of that. Otherwise, the information is subconscious. Now, if I said to you, you came to this workshop with the goal of cleaning up something in your mind that's really bothering you that you need to work on. What is that you need to work on? What is that you came here to resolve today? And notice what's happening with your breath. I'm not going to do a survey of everybody, but I can pretty much assure you that virtually everybody that's listening shut their breath down when I ask that question. Because these are the things that most people don't want to look at. And so they shut down, they create a barrier that inhibits that issue from firing. By definition, if I can't access it, it's there, it's in me, but it's unconscious. What I want to do is make the space for that which I don't normally allow myself to access to fire, to surface. For instance, what Corey just shared with us, it's probably not been one of Corey's favorite things to look at the trauma that went on from her mother when her mother withdrew. So that's unconscious information. And the way that we inhibit the subconscious, or the way we turn the subconscious into the unnatural unconscious, is by holding the breath. That's the way this veil or this barrier is built. So we're going to keep bugging you about breathing. We're going to remind you to the last minute in this study. If we're doing this 10 years from now, we're going to remind you 10 years from now, when your unconscious starts to try to come to the surface and you shut your breath down, we're going to remind you to breathe. And when you do, that opens the veil and you're able to become aware of what you've been hiding from yourself. So there are 3 levels of operation of the firing of brain cells, which we call the mind. It's not actually really the mind, but that's what we call it in the world. There's conscious, what you're aware of at the moment, the color of your car, the front door of your house, the trauma with your mother. So conscious and subconscious, what amplitude is that information firing? If it's at a higher amplitude, you're conscious of it. If it's at a lower amplitude, but you can access it, you know, what's the front door of your house look like, or what's the color of your car, that subconscious material fires at an intensified amplitude and you become aware of it. But then those things that I say, I never want to feel that, I never want to deal with that. Now, many people say, well, why would I ever want to do that? Why would I go there? Because literally, by definition, it's stored somewhere in your mind, and your mind is your body. And where you'd store dis-ease energies, your body will be diseased. Literally, physically. There's only one cause I would offer of so-called physical disease. And that is an energy within your mind that you will not allow yourself to deal with. And that energy holds pain associated with it. When you breathe, you open the veil and you allow yourself deeper and deeper contact with your own unconscious mind. And there's nothing more valuable than the tool that would take you into your unconscious and support you cleaning it up. And the breath is a key way into doing that. We actually have a whole set of workshops we do called Mind Shifters and Still Point Breathing. The Mind Shifter is a tool that's designed to resonate and show you what's going on in your unconscious. And then once you start to let that stuff move and you step into, there's a tool we teach called Still Point Breathing. The Still Point Breathing is a way to use the breath to de-energize or to release the pain that's associated with those things that we've hidden from ourselves. And so breathing is the key way into cleaning up our unconscious dynamics and literally healing not only our thought disorders, but our emotions and our physiology.
So we're here
All yours, Yinka.
Say again. Yeah, so we're here to support your healing. Pain gets locked into a reality. Holding your breath causes feelings and events to be linked and stored as a unit. The energy of an experience you are having is suppressed into tissues. When you breathe, your breath is held. Rather than staying stuck in upset, if you breathe, it is easier for the old patterns to break loose and distasteful present moment experience to pass. The breath is the switch that either restricts or allows energy to move in your system. Keeping your breath open makes healing much easier. So key thought, every day, it's the same old thing. Breathe, breathe,
Breathe,
breathe.
breathe. That's the key.
That fits for me. I'm just now recalling that when I was a kid, I was told over and over again that I was a sinner. I think that may have done more to drive me away from church than the hypocrites I saw. When you remind me to breathe, it feels like that old pattern of being condemned Richard shared. Let's process through what is happening and look at it step by step, Michael suggests. So is there anything in your past that was continually repeated to you that you would like to process as we process through Richard's? So you may just want to jot that down for yourself. Is there anything in your past that continually repeated to you that you would like to process? Wait a minute, just what is processing, Richard asks. So processing is defined as a capacity to hold love conscious, active and present when something less than love surfaces. It is the main key in healing. It releases the pain component of every reality unlike love. It is not an intellectual process, though the intellect can initiate it. Processing releases aliveness within. Once its energy starts to move in you, you can never be the same again. You are changed and transformed forever. When it happens, it may be like a lightning bolt or a gentle breeze. It doesn't matter. It's staring are often conscious at first. You may not know what has happened, but you will know that something has occurred. Value it, treasure it. It is the active power of love reorganizing the core of your being and the expression of the cause of your existence.
And Yink, I compliment you all the time on the visuals that you come up with, but that picture, especially being active in motion, that's exactly what processing would look like. There are things happening on so many levels. I mean, literally, if the breath is really moving properly, there are trillions of bits of data that can be processed in a literal instant. That's what we call the still point. It's like people go into, on an energetic level, go into a superconductor state. And in that state, it's impossible for awareness to keep up with all that's happening, because it is just like your visual showing, moving on so many levels. And that's where you just let go, breathe, keep bringing love present, and keep the breath moving, and things just start to move in the most amazing ways. Nice visual.
Richard, your pain around taking on the sinner label may have stemmed from your belief about being unjustly accused. We had recently discussed you having been called a sinner, so the idea of being unjustly accused was just beneath the surface in your mind. By repeatedly reminding you to breathe, that which was close to the surface was triggered. My reminder easily resonated your old feelings about being accused and doing something wrong. Remember, old suppressed realities distort perception. As a kid, you were probably told 1,000 times that you were a sinner, and each time your pain was reinforced. Your outburst about breathing was aimed at at what triggered the old pain. My reminder to breathe, your hidden agitation, was expressed as unconscious behavior and attack towards me. Recall your intention when you apologized to me earlier. Are you willing to commit to being responsible for your feelings and breathe instead of attacking or blaming?
Willingness is the cosmic grease that helps the energy to move. If I go into a process like this, kicking and screaming, no, I don't want to deal with that. You can literally take a trauma that maybe happened 50 years ago, and it was a 2-minute trauma, and you can still be doing it 50 years later if you're in a state of unwillingness. If you move into that state of softening and opening your physiology and breathing and stepping into wellness, you can take something that took 10 years to develop and be through it in 2 minutes. It's just how the process works. And again, our definition of processing is the ability to hold love, or the act of holding love, conscious, active, and present, when something less than love comes up.
Richard sighs heavily. I wouldn't have guessed there were so many dynamics under the surface driving my behavior. Is that where unconscious comes from? Unconscious and projection. Notice the agitation you had was actually about being called a sinner, something that perhaps you have not heard in decades. Your old feelings were triggered by my reminder, and you projected your upset into your mind's image of me.
And the objective of the work is to create the space where you're able and willing to access those aspects and dynamics within your own mind.
The bottom line is that there is no physical world. Everything, in truth, the world is a whirling mass of energy, a sea of motion with nothing solid. No thing exists apart from that energy. The mind is what generates the image that things are solid. The mind, because of its training, blocks the evidence that all things are connected and provides the illusionary image that everything is separated. The only place a body exists is an image in the mind.
Now, let's bring an insight we've spoken about many times throughout this study that comes from Einstein. And Albert Einstein said this about matter. He says, on such things as matter, we've been all wrong. What we have heretofore called matter is energy. Energy whose vibrations have been so lowered as to be perceptible to the senses. There is no matter. So the material world does not exist. Our eye, because we've been trained to generate perceptions, makes things look solid and physical and real. But there's nothing solid, physical, and real in that sense. You know, if I, you know, people often object when I offer that thought, and they say, well, look, if I clap my hands together, if it's all energy, why don't they just go through each other? Well, something else to understand about the world of energy and resonance is that when substances, what we call substances, have a matching atomic magnetic structure, they appear solid to each other. So I clap my hands together, and yes, because they are resonating on the same level, they appear solid. But let's do a thought experiment. Let's imagine that I make my left hand out of radio waves, and then I clap my hands together again. What happens? My left hand passes right through my right hand, right? If it's made of radio waves. Now, what if I made both of my hands out of radio waves? My offering would be that they'd appear solid to each other again because they're in resonance. So understanding how energy systems work, and we start to see life through the eyes of energy, the whole game changes. There's nothing solid, there's nothing physical, there's nothing real. And we have a great deal of say into how this energetic world that appears as matter shows up. We have a tremendous amount of input to that. You know, there's an interesting story in the ancient Old Testament. It's about 4,000 years ago. And it's this guy named Job. And when you extract religion from this whole thing and just look at, we're working to understand, and that's what was happening in those ancient texts. Yes, there are people who made religions out of it and tried to control people and beat people with and abuse people, did all kinds of crazy things. But that doesn't belie the fact that underneath it, there's a powerful understanding. So, you know, about 4,000 years ago, after a whole lot of suffering, Job offered the world a difficult and rarely comprehended lesson in responsibility, how the world actually works in creatorship. In one sentence, Job explained the physics, physiology, psychology, and emotional dynamics of how repeated, widespread, traumatic events and suffering are created. Job told us in one sentence all of that, if you have the eyes to see and the ears to hear. Here's what he said. If you remember the book of Job, it's basically a story of a man in a healing crisis. It goes through a major shift and trauma, suffering, loss. It's horrific. Everything, he loses everything. But his conclusion, what he finally recognizes, and this is what makes the turnaround, because of course, on the other side of Job, he gets everything back doubled. Why? Because he moved from the one world religion of blame to responsibility. And here's the sentence that he describes and sums it all up in. He says this, "For the thing I greatly feared has come upon me, and what I dreaded has happened to me." Now, if you've got the eyes to see and the ears to hear and understand that Job had this humbling insight that when fear and dread are running his mind, he's working against his own best interest. In admitting his tendency to blame and accepting responsibility for his dysfunctional mind, Job's opening a space for profound healing. He's stepping into a powerful, life-changing admission that he's the ultimate cause of his own suffering, loss, and destruction. In effect, Job is owning the fact that he has a particularly pernicious form of mental illness. The huge first step in healing is to give up looking outside of ourselves for the cause of our experiences and admit there's a problem inside. When we fully unpack Job's insight and apply it to our lives, we come to understand our part, as Job did, in causing the terrible events and repeating generational patterns in our lives. He plainly and emphatically tells us that the feared and dreaded outcomes in our lives begin in our own minds. When we live with a mind fueled by fear and dread, we're limited to a life of conflict, pain, suffering, and seeming hopelessness, and repeated experiences. Job, however, after his deeply painful experience, is informing us that when we live in the mental illness of fear and dread, applied to a fantasized outcome, we set the blueprint for the events that will be delivered by life. When we add additional unresolved emotional amplifiers of thought complexes based in fear and dread, things like guilt and greed, hostility in any of its forms, into this scenario, we've got a perfect trifecta for victimhood and repeated trauma. When we integrate from Job's perspective the understanding, the truth, all of a sudden the words innocent victim become and are recognized as an oxymoron. There's no such thing as an innocent victim. We are volunteers. Well, how did I volunteer for this? I don't know. Maybe it's something that happened in your bloodline 10 generations ago. But what I do know is if you'll apply forgiveness now in this moment to that which is robbing you of the ability to experience yourself and express yourself as love, then you'll find the underlying pattern and you'll be able to remove it. So recognize that simple statement, the profound conclusion in Job's deep experiential learning is the fact that the power to bring about results in the world lies in the mind entertaining a complex of negative thoughts and intensifying that energy with fear. And, when I look at that, that book's 4,000 years old. And in there, my background's in electronics with a side study in physics. And this is one of the first indications in the world writings that I see there's an understanding, it's a rudimentary understanding, but an understanding of the world of quantum physics, how it actually works. So if you wish to rid yourself of a feared, dreaded event, fighting against that event in the world is futile. Because by simply engaging in resistive energy, you just added to the cause, which is within. As long as fear and dread are attached to a negative fantasy in the mind, the world must deliver its promise. Ask and you will receive. It's guaranteed. You hold a feared result in your mind. That literally on an energetic level, where we can measure the physics of your thoughts, becomes the cause. And somehow the result will continue to arrive right on time as anticipated until its cause is removed. And that's what this tool of forgiveness is about, is collapsing into your own unconscious dynamics that bring these results about and freeing yourself of them. So how does the blind application of fear to a clearly unwanted result bring about precisely that result in the world again and again and again? What you can do about it? Well, the name of my book is Why Is This Happening to Me Again? And What You Can Do About It. This is what you can do about it.
So the suppressed
Go for it, young lady.
Sorry, what did you say?
Go for it.
All right. So the suppressed energies you hold from an old experience when triggered by someone are used by your mind as a foundation of the image it generates of them. We cannot see a suppressed attribute someone triggers as our own because it shows up in our minds as belonging to them. We actually project our attributes into our brain's image of them. The relief of successful projection. One problem remains, however. Why am I in pain if it is their error? Why am I the one who is there every single time?
It's a bummer of an insight, but it's the most powerful one you'll ever get. Because if you can own that, you can then access your own unconscious mind and remove those energetic dynamics. And that's an exciting proposition.
Even though it can feel a very big bummer.
Yeah. It's the good news and the bad news.
Yeah.
I have some really bad news for you. There's only one problem in your life, and you're it. I have some really good news for you. There's only one problem in your life, and you're it. And when you can accept that as good news, then you can access the unconscious part of yourself where the problem really lies, and you can forgive it and change everything in an instant.
Beware you who judge another for that in which you judge another. You have been guilty of practicing. I think you'll find the Aramaic concept of sin will tie this all together in a way that makes sense. I invite you to notice how practical and informative these Aramaic ideas are when you see them in the context of real life. Here we go with sin again, Michael. I don't know whether to love you or hate you. I feel inspired and overwhelmed at the same time. It seems like the more I hear of what you say, the more work I realize I have to do. Does it ever end? Richard says frustratingly. And I can certainly resonate with Richard.
Yeah, it does. And remember, if you're new to this, our definition of sin comes out of the 1st century Aramaic language. It's got nothing to do with the Greek interpretation of you're a sinner, it's all your fault, blah. That whole stuff is just a way to keep people in their unconscious pain. In Aramaic, the word sin is an archery term. If you were on the archery range, you picked up your bow and you fired an arrow at the bullseye and you missed the bullseye, the scorekeeper would yell sin, you're off the mark. That's all the energy means, all the word means. If you bring an energy into your structure that is off the mark, something that is incoherent with a device designed to incarnate and express love, then you've sinned. You put an energy in that doesn't belong in the system. When you put that energy into an integrated system and it's an incoherent, disintegrative energy, it's off the mark, then the system starts to fall apart. That's what led them in the ancient teachings to say the wages of sin is death. That's not some kind of theological threat. God's going to get you. They're just talking about physiology. You put an energy in that doesn't belong, and the system starts to fall apart. You do enough of it, and you die. And I'd offer that all death is self-inflicted. Sin, S-I-N, self-inflicted nonsense. It's time to take those energies that are off the mark, and we're warned when we put an energy into our structure that is off the mark, because the system yells, ouch, that hurts. Now, most people have accumulated and generationally have accumulated so much hurt. It's like, no, I don't ever want to go there. But the only resolution is going there and cleaning it out piece by piece by piece. So that's what we're here to support.
I'm not sure when the end comes. Again, I remind you, it is a process. Your feeling overwhelmed is pretty much on track for where you are. Almost everyone cycles through this stage several times as they learn this work. The healing accelerates as you develop the capacity to hold a space of conscious, active, present love, while unresolved issues surface, explained Michael. Conscious what? Richard sputtered. I can't even say it, let alone do it. What does that mean? That is a key question. And before we get into an emotional loaded concept like sin, let's talk about our next chapter, which it will be holding a space of love, which will be on the 14th of December, as we will not be here in 2 weeks because Michael will be away.
Yes, the 14th is Thanksgiving Day here, and that's next to Christmas, that's the biggest family get together. And at the time that that this session would be happening here in the States, it's Thanksgiving, and our family already has, independent of us, other members of the family have set up a big family dinner at 3 o'clock in the afternoon here, which is 8 o'clock there. So we won't be able to participate in that, but we'll certainly be back in the following session.
Yeah. Also,
And I
I think
noticed-
I've made my estimate. So is it the 23rd of November you're not going to be here?
Or the
4th?
23rd, yes.
Yes, so the 23rd of November you're not going to be here.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Pardon me. Yeah.
But will you be here on the 14th of December? That's the second.
Yes.
Yeah.
We will be here. We'll rock with it for sure. And I noticed in the chat room somebody asked about still point breathing. So the still point breathing process is a way of using the breath. It's something that I discovered personally in doing my own personal work, about 45 years ago, and have used it now in my work. It's next to forgiveness, it's probably the most important tool that we teach. And it's a way of using the breath to open what we would call the veil of the temple, and in massive ways access the unconscious dynamics and move through them, literally moving out of a resistive state. If you go to the Aramaic language, the word Satan is not some dude with a red suit, a tail, and a pitchfork. In the Aramaic language, the word Satan means the resistor, one who misleads. And you watch the average person when you ask them to be responsible for their trauma, the first thing they'll do is hold their breath. The second thing they'll do is say, no, it isn't me. And then they'll tell you they're mislead. They'll go on and tell you the story all about how it's somebody else's fault. That is what in the ancient Aramaic was being called trapped in Satan. Now the Greeks turned it into this dude with the red suit, the tail of the pitchfork that's out to get us, and blah, 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 blah. No, that's not what it is at all. It's inside of us. And resistance is where the structure tightens. It restricts blood flow. It restricts oxygen nutrient delivery to cells. It locks trauma into tissue. It's, as our first slide said, the way to acquire a past about something is hold your breath in the presence of an experience, and you will lock that energy into tissue. So the still point breath is a way to use the breath to open that veil and move into a, rather than a resistive state, into a superconductor state, where you can start to move those unconscious energies in. It's like, the difference between, gee, the boat is being flooded with water. I have a thimble. I'm going to see if I can empty the boat. And the alternative, the still point breath, is like, okay, so I have a 100-gallon per minute pump. I'm going to turn it on and flush the boat of the water. That's what the still point process is. We do have, I think our next session is on the 18th of November, the third Saturday and Sunday of every month. We have a Mind Shifters and Still Point Breathing Club. It's a monthly event. And if you go to our website, go to whyagain.org and look under events, you'll see a link to the Mind Shifters Club if you want to join, if you want to do a single session. Again, the next one will be at 11 o'clock a.m. in the US, which I guess is 5 hours, so it'll be 6 o'clock in the evening there on Saturday the 18th and Sunday the 19th. We do 2 days. So the first day, again, we start at 11 o'clock Eastern time here. And we prior to the session, we'll assign you a mind shifter. And if you decide to register for it, we'll send you information that explains how the mind shifter works. There are actually a couple of videos that you can watch on how that, or a video that we'll send you. We'll have you writing a mind shifter, and then we'll open the session 11 o'clock. We'll talk about what people have been working on, what their mind shifter was, what came up for them, questions, and then we'll actually step into guiding you in the still point process. So we'll walk through it. It's not something that I write about or instruct outside of personal experience, because if people try to do it on their own, they tend to get in trouble and lock themselves up on an even deeper level. So I only explain and teach the process in person, and in an actual experience of the process. So if you want to join us for that, it is a workshop. We do as much as we can free, but it is one that there is a fee involved. And there are 3 different ways of joining that workshop or that club. You can do a 1-month session, you can register for 3 months, or you can register for a year. If you do a 1-month session, the 2-day session is $150 US. If you want to do 3 sessions, each of the 3 sessions is reduced to $125. And if you register for the whole year is $900. So it really drops the price considerably. If you decide you want to try 1 session and see if it fits for you, and if you want to continue, it's a really strong, small but strong community around it that really opens a space and is really there supporting each other and doing the work. You can do 1 session, and then if you decide, well, gee, I want to go for the year, then we'll prorate that month so it drops to, you're credited for the extra that you would have paid if you do the year registration. So that's our Mind Shifters and Still Point Breathing. So any other thoughts, questions, answers for anybody?
There is a question in the chat with Rax, but I'm not quite understanding the question. I'm not sure if you want to ask the question, Rax.
Hi. Just wanted to, in the scenario that there was this proton, and you had a conflict with a friend or family friends or whoever you, how would you resolve that issue with the other person or the family member, whoever it is, who's triggered that pain, so that you have a respectful friendship, family, friends, relation, whatever it is?
My offering would be, you would take the worksheet process. There's the place to start. You go step by step through it. And, of course, we don't have the time to go through that whole process right now, but there are several videos where we've walked somebody through the whole thing. So you can go to Yinka's site and those videos are posted. It'll walk you step by step through it. Again, you can go to your app store on your phone, type in Heartland, Heartland, one word, Aramaic, Aramaic, forgiveness. That will download an app. It's free, and you can do the process right there. And from within the app, you can ask questions if you have any, and we'll answer them for you. And take the tool and put it to work. That would be the way to do it.
Yeah, that's for yourself. But if you want to, once you've done all the work within yourself, would you have a conversation with the other person?
Well, my offering would be, of course, you can step into having a conversation with that other person, but first I do my own work to remove the disturbance that's inside of me around whatever it is that's going on.
Okay.
And I'm going to be able to have a much clearer conversation.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to know. Thank you.
Okay, awesome. Blessings. All right, well, thank you everybody for joining us, holding the space between now and our next session. Remember, our radio show is there, or if you have the app, and on every page in the app, you can just click and ask a question, hit send, and that'll go to my wife, Jeannie. She'll bring that question up on our next radio show. I'll answer it, and then she'll send you back a link to the show so you can listen to the answer. If you have access to, long distance service, phone service in America, then you can just dial into the show. It's 1 till 2 o'clock, 5 days a week, Monday to Friday. And the call-in number is 563-999-3581. So you can listen to the show if you have long distance access here, or you can go to our website, whyagain.org, and you'll see a microphone on the page. Click on that microphone and it will give you instructions on how to access it on your computer. You can listen to the show. There's a chat room. You can join Blog Talk Radio. They're very protective of their information. It's never shared with anybody. And you can ask questions in the chat room on the radio show if you don't have long distance access. So thank you all for joining us. Have a blessed day. Yes.
I'm just saying thank you, Michael. I'm just going to leave some music playing for those that are just to play.
Thank you, everyone. Always
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Thank you, everybody.
Yes,
Great
thank
Delighted.
you.
Thank you.
Blessings.
Blessing.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Happy